What's up, degenerates? This is Locked In. I'm your host, Mason Cameron, at PFF_Mace on Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta, at Vishaal_Gupta95 on Twitter. V, I'm all smiles already, baby. It's a good first Thursday of the week. I'm loving it. Or good after the Thursday game of the week. There we go. I can speak words. How are you doing, though, V? How's your week been so far? How are you thinking on the slate this week?
Doing good. Week was going all right until we were all forced to watch that abomination of a football game last night. But I am very much looking forward to the slate this weekend. We got a bunch of really, really good games. So, yeah, trying to put last night out of my mind completely and moving on to this weekend.
What do you mean, V? That was a great game. It was full of action and suspense. I loved it. I was giddy with it. And, no better way to transition into our regularly scheduled breakdown of the Thursday game than that. But let's jump right into the action. Like you said, V, I'm really excited to break this one down. I had a lot of fun. Like I said, personally, we got to see the Broncos head into New Orleans. There we go. And take down the Saints 33-10. They covered as 3-point road favorites. Over on this game, we were talking about this at the beginning of the show. 37 points. They went over. It was 43 total, and that came off of that garbage time New Orleans touchdown. I think it was like under 2 minutes left. It was really just that last heave. The only thing to be said about this game is that Denver's defense is for real. They played incredible. They only allowed 3.4 yards per play, which is absolutely phenomenal. Cody Barton came out of absolutely nowhere. I mean, he's been having a good season so far, but he had a fumble recovery for the touchdown. He had a sack force fumble. He dropped an interception that he could have had. So he looked really good. He was all over the place, all around the ball. The team themselves, they racked up 6 sacks, 43.8% pressure rate. They just really, really hammered New Orleans. Spencer Rattler under center did not have a good day. And I mean, it's kind of to be expected with how patchwork their offensive line has been and the wide receivers that they were throwing to. Bub Means, Mason Tipton. Mason Tipton had like 9 targets and Cedric Wilson. So really not the best group out there. And then defensively, the Saints just got absolutely gashed on the ground. The Denver running game was really, really good, which has been a little bit surprising because they haven't been so good in recent weeks. And all of a sudden, Javonte Williams, he had an 88-yard day, 2 touchdowns. Audric Estime came back. He played well. McLaughlin, they were both efficient. Now, they didn't really pop off or anything, but they had really efficient numbers. And it really was because of the offensive line, 2.9 yards before contact. So incredibly effective. Tank over here started the Broncos defense in 2 leagues, already starting the week with a huge, huge upside. It's hard to lose games in fantasy when you start with an extra. I mean, what did they get in fantasy? Probably like 18 to 20. Yeah, they had a monstrous game. So they were fantastic in this one. It meant all the difference. V, I know you said you didn't have so much fun, and I'm sure everybody outside of the Denver area didn't have quite as much fun. Tank says they had 22. That's incredible. What did you make of this game, V?
Well, trying to figure out a nice way to put this. This game struggled to hold my attention. I think that's the best way I can put it. So I don't have too many crazy thoughts or interesting thoughts on this one because, to be honest, it was not something I was totally keeping my eye on throughout the whole thing. I think you mentioned a lot. You mentioned it at the top. Denver's defense, phenomenal. And this is without Pat Surtain. And I don't believe Baron Browning has played yet this season. Is that correct? He's still been out, or did he play last night?
That's a good question. I'll check on that while you're looking.
Yeah, but they played incredible. They were all over Spencer Rattler in that offense. This is kind of the performance I was hoping to get from them this past Sunday against the Chargers. Unfortunately, didn't happen, but good to see it happening last night. The big takeaway, though, I feel like is just what is going on with the Saints defense. Like, it's just unbelievable how poorly they played. And you would expect this veteran-laden team, after getting just completely embarrassed in the second half on Sunday against the Buccaneers, where they gave up 27 unanswered points in that second half, that you would put up at least some sort of fight, but oh my God, it was just they weren't doing anything. The holes that were opening up in the run game were unbelievable. Stuff you haven't seen from this Broncos offense all season. They weren't able to do anything against the run game, and Bo Nix was. I'm interested to hear what you think. I'm still not very much into Bo Nix, and I don't know how well he played last night. Obviously, the viral moment was that throw that he had early in the game in between two receivers. He wasn't playing very well, and still he had a easy day against the Saints defense. And I know they have a couple injuries here and there. Adebo went out middle of the game with a bad injury, but you still have guys like Cameron Jordan. You still have guys like Marshawn Lattimore, Tyrann Mathieu, Alontae Taylor. Like they're still good veteran players on that defense. You just can't let things like last night happen. It's just not acceptable. So super concerning with that Saints defense. And then obviously if we're going to continue having injuries on that offense with Carr out and some of their offensive linemen out and some of their receivers out, oh boy, this is going to be a brutal season. And, them having the first overall pick is still in play, as we mentioned, preseason, on our preseason show. So it's still something to look out for.
Yeah, and absolutely. And one of the big things with that Saints defense is, like you said, even their good players have kind of been uncharacteristically making some really poor mistakes. One of the things you talked about with Bo Nix. Bo Nix had that one decently nice throw, but he also had that one that hit Tyrann Mathieu right in the chest and looked like one of the ugliest throws that I threw up my hands, did not know what was happening. That's actually his first turnover-worthy throw over the last 4 games. So that's a plus for him. But you're right. He hasn't really been pushing the ball down the field. And with how bad the running game was, they just really weren't good on offense as a whole. But now running the ball a little bit better, then they can kind of work in the passing game. They don't really have a ton of targets. Courtland Sutton didn't have a single target in this game, which is a little bit of a shock, especially since they had 33 points. Obviously not all offensive, but that's one of the things that is really come down to Bo Nix. If they're really going to take a step forward, does have to start playing better. But really, this Saints defense just has not made good on their opportunities. A couple weeks ago, we talked about Tyrann Mathieu dropping that ball that hit him in the chest. Well, a couple weeks ago, he had one against Juju where he let up a 50-yard reception because he tripped over his own heels on a fairly simple release. So those are the mistakes that you're getting from these guys that are at the top of this roster that just aren't typical for them. And it's really putting them behind the 8 ball in pretty much every conceivable circumstance. And this is probably one of the worst games they've seen. And it's understandable because, like you said, the offense is just completely strapped. This is the JV offense by all intents and purposes because they don't have Derek Carr. They don't have any of these receivers. And what is this offensive line doing? The offensive line was kind of the heart of what was making this whole team very, very good at the beginning of the season, playing with leads, letting them let their coverage play shine. And now that's just not really the case. Teams are getting leads against them, running against them, and that's not where they're really that good. And we saw that last night. So I don't know what's to make of this Saints team. It was kind of like what you called out at the beginning of the year where, hey, this could be very, very bad. And now it looked better. And I think we were both surprised, but then they kind of regressed back to the mean. And now they're falling even further than that because they just don't have any of their playmakers. So it's a tough look for them. Denver, though, advancing to what is it that they are against the spread now? 6-1, 6-1,
something like that.
6-1, 5-2, something like that.
I think they maybe pushed week 1, but whatever.
Yeah, so they're pretty dang good against the spread. Hasn't been quite the same for the Saints recently. So
and then the Broncos, I think they get the Panthers next week, so a good chance to go to 5-3 and have a nice start to the first half of the season.
This city is inconsolable now that they're 4-3. They're above 500. Hasn't necessarily played so well. There's a lot of orange-colored glasses out here, but that's a conversation for another day that we will talk about. But we get into our slate of the week, and V, there's some good games on the slate this week, and we are going to talk about quite a few of them. The first one on the list here being Houston at Green Bay. Green Bay -3 in this one. 47, 48, 48 and a half, or excuse me, 47 to about 48 and a half on the game total here. V, you're liking the line in this game. What are you thinking about this one?
Yeah, I'm looking at Houston getting the full 3 points in this game. This line has bounced around slightly throughout the week. It was a plus 2.5 for a little bit. I think yesterday or the day before. It's back up to plus 3 today that I saw it, and I had to jump on that one. CJ Stroud getting a full 3 points, too hard to pass up. I understand that Green Bay has looked really solid the last couple of weeks, but I'm still a believer in this Houston Texans team. I mean, they're 5-1, so it's not like anybody's doubting them. But with some of the injuries that they've suffered, I think especially on offense with Nico Collins and stuff like that, people might be sleeping a little bit on Houston right now. But man, hard to bet against CJ Stroud right now. The guy is playing unbelievably well right now. His numbers aren't like gaudy or anything like that. He has 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, averaging 262 passing yards per game. But he is playing on a very, very high level right now. He's making every throw you could ask for. He's managing the pocket well. He's doing stuff outside the pocket that you weren't seeing too much of last year. Getting a lot better at that this season. He's making all these plays, even without Nico Collins out there. He's finding Tank Dell. He's finding Stephon Diggs, Dalton Schultz, all these guys. It's been super impressive to see, and I think it's going to continue rolling this week. They got Joe Mixon back on offense last week. He had a really solid day against New England, 132 total yards and 2 touchdowns, a much-needed boost to their running game that has really been super flat since he went out early in their Week 2 game against the Bears. They're going up against a Green Bay defense that is, an interesting unit. They have some really good numbers in certain areas, like they lead the league in takeaways. They're 9th in total points allowed at 20.2 points per game. But I think a lot of their success has come against either bad quarterbacks or injured offenses. They've played a Will Levis led Tennessee team, an Anthony Richardson led Indianapolis team, and then they played the Rams when they were completely decimated on offense with a bunch of their receivers out and offensive linemen out. And then they played Arizona last week, whose offense has just been kind of a dumpster fire, to be honest, outside of their week 1 or outside of the first 2 weeks where they looked really good. Since then, just nothing consistent going on with Arizona. So still not totally sure what this Green Bay defense is because, again, had good performances against some bad teams. But when they played good teams like Philly or Minnesota this season, they have been known to give up quite a few points. So interesting to see. This will be a very good test for them this weekend against Houston's offense. On the flip side, Jordan Love has looked really, really good. I think, he got hurt at the end of that Week 1 game and a little slow coming back from his injury, but I think the last 2 weeks, he's looked really, really good. 4 touchdowns last week, 69% completion percentage. He's throwing the ball all over the field with ease, some deep bombs to Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, some short stuff to Jaden Reed. It's just everything has been working for him the last couple of weeks. Now he's going up against a Houston defense that has quite a few injuries, unfortunately. Kamari Lassiter is out, Jimmy Ward is out, and Al Shire is out at linebacker, who's been playing super well for them. So, there are a lot of factors pointing towards Green Bay in this one. The key matchup that I'm looking for on that side of the ball is what can Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter do in terms of getting pressure on Jordan Love. Will Anderson, 5.5 sacks so far this year. Danielle Hunter, 2.5 sacks. Jordan Love has only been sacked 4 times in the 4 games he's played, so he's not taking a ton of sacks. But again, how much of that is competition that he's gone up against versus how much is it this offensive line for Green Bay playing well? It's super interesting to see. Overall, I just feel like 3 points for CJ Stroud is just not something I can pass up, so I have to take that one this week.
Yeah, and I mean, when you talk about Houston, they aren't really that good against the spread, only 2-4 against the spread, but they cover their last 2. And they've been favorites in every single game this year. So this is the first time they're getting points. It's a very alluring line when you think about that, especially when it being a clean 3. I definitely like where your thoughts are with that too. Both teams coming off pretty big victories. Houston covered 6.5 on the road versus New England. Green Bay covered 5.5 at home against Arizona. And like you talked about with Green Bay and that defense, it does come down to a little bit of kind of luck in terms of injuries on opposing teams. Last week, Marvin Harrison, I think, had 6 receiving snaps before he went down. Right. So that's a tough look when you're playing Arizona. He's been a really strong suit for them. Every time he plays well, they end up playing really well as an entire offense. So you do have a good point there. And when you talk about CJ Stroud, Jordan Love combined for 16 passing touchdowns over the last 3 games, they're both pretty incredible, just throwing the ball all over the place, especially Jordan Love, who has 10, I'm pretty sure, over the last 3 games. CJ Stroud, though, I mean, he's going to be up there in the MVP conversation, most likely. He throws the ball with such ease. He really is making plays look easy. He flicks them. He's playing well under pressure. He is fantastic. He is really what you want to see coming along in year 2 of a guy that played really well in year 1. So he continues to make strides. The biggest matchup for me in this one, undoubtedly, is how he plays against these Packers safeties. Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney are the league's highest graded safety tandem in the NFL. Evan Williams plays a little bit in the slot as well, so they kind of move him around just a little bit. But Xavier McKinney in deep free, he is the best safety out there right now. He has 5 interceptions. He has a 62.5% interception per coverage target rate. That's insane. Don't throw it this guy's way. So when you do, he takes it away from you. But that's also something that CJ Stroud's done pretty well. He doesn't really give the ball away on his deep throws. He does uncork it quite a bit, 15-yard throws, but he's not the type that's going to put the ball in danger. He reads defenses well, and he throws to open guys. That's why even when Nico Collins is out, he's still playing really well, feeding it all over the field to Tank Dell, into Diggs and just pretty much everybody in this offense. So I completely agree. I like Houston +3 here, getting the points. Green Bay is a good team as well. This is going to be a close game. And when you get into close games like this, sometimes you want to take those points. So yeah, I'm definitely agreeing with you on that. The next game on the list is not quite as good of a game, not quite as nice of one, but one that I think is a good opportunity for some value here. We have Tennessee heading into Buffalo to take on the Bills. Buffalo -8.5. It looks like it's actually moving in some places, -8 here, according to betting pros, and even up towards +9.5. So make sure you're shopping around for this one. Total on this game, about 45.5 points. I've got to go with the Bills here. I know 8.5 points seems like a really big spread given what they've done in recent weeks. Only 1-2 against the spread over the last 3, but we have to take into account the context of what that 1-2 against the spread looked like. They were on a 3-game road trip against 3 pretty tough teams: Baltimore, Houston, New York Jets. Like, those are no slouch teams. Tennessee is not up there in that echelon of teams. But this team is also 2-0 against the spread at home. The last time they were at home, they slapped Jacksonville 47-10. And that was back in week 3. I know that seems like so long ago, and we like to talk about recent trends. I'm the recent trends guy. I love that. But when you see who they're coming up against this week, I'm just not sure Tennessee has much of anything figured out right now. They look like one of the worst ball clubs in the NFL. They can keep into games in the fourth quarter, and then Will Levis just find some way to give it away. They are 1-4 against the spread. Only cover came when getting points on the road versus Miami and Tyler Huntley. That is how bad you have to be to get points. Or, I mean, how bad do you have to be to get 2.5 points in Miami against this Dolphins team? Yeah. That, I think, tells you everything. It doesn't matter that they won. And I get that they won sizably, but I don't really think that matters.
That was with Levis getting hurt like super early in the game.
Exactly. So when you think about that, I don't know if this is a matchup that really scares me, where 8.5, 9.5 points really means a whole lot. I think they're going to win a pretty clean and easy 10+ point victory. Part of that is that this defense is better than it's looked on paper. On paper, they've struggling in coverage and pass rush. That's without a doubt over the last 3. But when you look at who they played Lamar Jackson, they played CJ Stroud, they played Aaron Rodgers, and those aren't necessarily guys that are, the least mobile. Like, those guys do move around a bit. Rodgers is a little bit old, but when he gets out of the pocket, he keeps his eyes downfield and attacks. CJ Stroud, he's moving around a little bit, making plays in the face of pressure, and we already know what Lamar can do. This week you have Will Levis. It's just, the picture is not the same. The Bills in the fourth quarter are actually doing decently well. They really button it up when it comes time to it. They forced 3 fourth quarter turnovers over their last 3 games, including the interception last week to seal it against the Jets. Will Levis loves to give the ball away in the fourth quarter. He's very particularly good at it. Unfortunately, it's his third back. Last week, he put up his third backbreaking fourth quarter turnover, or at least turnover worthy play. He has the lowest fourth quarter passing grade in the NFL per our friends over at Pro Football Focus. That's just not a good look. I don't know that he's going to be able to do much, even though it looks like Buffalo has been, quote unquote, struggling on defense and struggling in coverage. This is the type of matchup they get right in. And I think that they're going to look a lot better. And that's all without saying what Buffalo has over there with adding Amari Cooper, who is been announced as being expected to play. Now, how much that is exactly, I don't know. Me and Neil talked about it over on the show on Wednesday on Roster the People. And I think they're going to try to simplify the offense for him. I think they're going to put him into positions to run some pretty simplistic routes, some backside digs, some go balls, some things like that. Let him get his feet wet. And I think he can really make a big difference in this game, even on a limited production, because they're going to want to take advantage of L'Jarius Sneed either being out because he's questionable this week, a question mark, after 3 DNPs, which, I mean, you would think he would be out, but frankly, if he does end up playing, it's not really going to matter. He has the lowest coverage grade in the NFL at the position. So this is something that this team is going to want to take advantage of, even in a limited sample size. And I think that we're going to see at least a little bit. And even without it, I don't think it's going to be an issue. I like Buffalo to roll here by well over. Anything that you're seeing on this one, partner?
Yeah, I was actually looking at this game kind of closely throughout the week, and I was actually pretty close to taking Tennessee in this one, not necessarily because I have any sort of belief in Will Levis at all or whatsoever. It's just honestly because I just felt like the 9.5 points was a little bit too much. I know the Buffalo was rolling quite well early in the season. The last couple of weeks they've slowed down, and this is not an offense that's totally at 100% right now, but they were dealing with injuries. James Cook was out last week. Shakir was dealing with some injuries. I think Kincaid was dealing with some injuries, stuff like that. It does look like they're kind of back to full health right now. And then you throw in the addition of Amari Cooper. There's expecting to be a really, really good offense. And, I'm pretty high on Tennessee's defense overall. I like a lot of the guys they had, whether it's Jeffrey Simmons, T'Vondre Sweat. They've looked good their last couple of games, but a lot of that has been matchup dependent. You mentioned the Tyler Huntley Dolphins. That's not a difficult matchup whatsoever. They did do pretty well last week against the Colts, so held them to 20 points. That is still Joe Flacco. I know he's been pretty good the last year and a half, but it's still Joe Flacco and that team without Jonathan Taylor, so there are some limitations there. This Buffalo offense is a completely different beast, though, and it doesn't feel worth it. Like, even though I might still think just getting 9.5 is too many points, and it might be a slightly better play there. But overall, for me, there's other plays this week that I like better. So I'm just probably going to stay away from this one, but have no issues with taking Buffalo in this one.
Yeah, 100%. Tennessee definitely has some pretty good looking defensive efficiency numbers in terms of EPA per play against the run and against the pass. So they are up there. They've played decently well. But like you said, I think some of that's matchup dependent. And with what we're going to see with Buffalo, hopefully they're back to full strength. But even without, they were able to kind of pick it up on the ground against the Jets. I mean, part of that is too that the Jets have not been able to stop the run. So that's going to be something that we'll definitely have to see. But yeah, I think when you do talk about what the line is here, we can have differing opinions, because when you see 9.5 versus like I said, it's coming down to 8 apparently in some spots according to betting pros. Go ahead, shop around, see whatever you're liking, and I'm definitely going to lean on the side of Buffalo here to get right, I think. And I can't wait to watch. Quietly, I'm not the biggest Amari Cooper guy, not the biggest, believer in this Bills wide receiving room. But all of these things considered, all of these things together, this is actually going to be a pretty good core for Josh Allen, especially given what we've talked about, how he's been trying to throw to the open guy. Now, he struggled a lot recently, and that's going to be a huge question, but hopefully this is going to be one of those, like I said, get right games for them, get some confidence back under him for sure.
Yep.
The next game on the list, though, another really, really good matchup on the week. Detroit heading into Minnesota. Minnesota 1.5 point favorites, or it looks like you can get it as high as 2.5 for Detroit at some spots. Total on this game, about 50.5 points. V, you're targeting something in this game. What are you liking for it?
Yeah, I am liking Detroit to cover the 1.5. That's where I got it at. It's just hard to pass up on this Detroit team right now. I mean, unbelievable stuff that they've been doing the last couple of weeks. Their offense completely unstoppable the last two games that they've played. 42 or more points in each of their last two games, over 390 yards of total offense in both of those games. In the last two games, Jared Goff has a total of 7 incompletions. Everything is just working so well right now, and it looks so easy too. It's not like they're doing anything that looks difficult. Every time Goff steps back and throws it down deep, somebody is wide ass open, whether it's Jameson Williams or Sam Laporta off a huge trick play, whatever it is. There's just guys running wide open down the field. And again, we said a lot last year. We can continue saying it this year. All the credit to Ben Johnson. He is just doing phenomenal stuff with that playbook and that offense right now. It's just awesome to watch, to see them do that, see them grow. It's just crazy stuff, and they're doing a lot of this without Amon-Ra St. Brown really contributing all that much over the first 5 weeks, because he really hasn't had to. He only has 31 catches for 289 yards on the season. And, once he gets going, once they figure out they have to start involving him in the offense, an already incredible offense might get even better. It's hard to fathom, but yeah, they're doing so much stuff and they're not even having all their guys totally unlocked yet. So could be getting even better down the road. On the other side, the matchup though, they're going up against this Minnesota defense that has been truly fantastic to start the season, allowing 15.2 points per game. They're allowing the second fewest rushing yards per game. They are allowing the third most passing yards per game, but I would imagine a lot of that has to do with game script, because they're getting out ahead early on in a lot of these games. I think there's a stat where they've only been trailing for 2 or 3 minutes this entire season. So when you have the lead like that, you're going to be facing quite a bit of passing situations. So some of those yards, I'm sure, it has to do with game script rather than the lack of ability to defend the pass. But they're tied for third in sacks, and they lead the league in pressure percentage. So they definitely know how to get after the quarterback, and they're tied for second in takeaways. So that's the key in this game. What can this Detroit offense do against this Minnesota defense? I have faith in Ben Johnson to figure this out, and I think they can do whatever they need to, even against this Brian Flores defense. On the flip side, Minnesota's offense, they looked phenomenal the first, I would say, 4 games of the season. Sam Darnold looked like a completely different guy, totally rejuvenated under Kevin O'Connell. So they scored 28 or more in 3 of their first 4 games. They did struggle quite a bit, though, in their last game before the bye against the Jets in London. Darnold completed less than 50% of his passes, 0 touchdowns, and 2 turnovers. He was sacked 4 times. So, it's definitely going to be interesting to see going forward how much of the first 4 games were, that's who this team is going to be on offense. That's who Sam Darnold is going to be, versus how much of that was, people kept not being ready for Sam Darnold, with him catching them off guard. And, he's going to turn into more of the guy we were accustomed to seeing, whether it was with the Jets or the Panthers or the Niners. So very interesting to see. Detroit's defense quietly been pretty good this year. They're only giving up 18.2 points per game, which is the 8th best in the NFL, allowing the 3rd fewest rushing yards in the league. So they're doing some good things, but obviously they lose Aiden Hutchinson last week. Massive loss on that defense. Probably league leader at that point for Defensive Player of the Year, just racking up the sacks left and right. So huge loss, but they still have quality players on that defense, I think. Aleem McNeil just got a massive extension. He's been playing well on the interior of that defensive line. You have young guys like Brian Branch who are getting better every week. And, I think we'll see some good stuff from Terran Arnold coming up as he gets more experience too. So still have guys there, but overall just can't pass up on the Lions getting points right now. And I believe in Ben Johnson and what he's doing.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about Ben Johnson and Brian Flores, 2 of the guys that are undoubtedly going to be the top candidates for head coaching jobs this offseason. 100%. Detroit, like you said, playing so good offensively, 40 plus in each of their last 2. They had the highest EPA per play since week 4, and that's by a huge margin. They're hitting in both facets, on the ground and in the passing game. Like you said, everybody's open. You have Tim Patrick catching balls for them. They look pretty dang good on all fronts. And then Minnesota, they're coming off a bye, rested. Just won over this year, but I'm liking the over on 50.5 here. Part of it is because of that offense, But the other part being is that I don't know that Minnesota is going to be able to force the turnovers that they've come accustomed to. What we've seen is that the Minnesota D is sporting the best EPA per play allowed this year, which is fantastic. They have all these takeaways. That's a big part of it. But Detroit really hasn't turned the ball over a whole lot. They haven't had a turnover since week 3. That's the 4th fewest in the NFL. So I really like them being able to, like you said, figure it out, not give the ball away, and stay on schedule. And I think that when you look at that, you're going to see production. They're not going to hit that 40 range, definitely not against this Minnesota defense, but they can get into this 21 to 24 to whatever 27 type range that I think is very doable. I think this game will end up being close. I can see where you're saying that you like the points for Detroit, especially when we talk about some of these games that are going to be higher scoring. It's nicer to just take that little extra lump with the points. So I definitely can feel that. I didn't like it quite as much just because Minnesota's been so good against the spread. They're a perfect 5-0, and now they're coming off a bye. And that 5-0 doesn't just come against no-name teams. They're winning outright against San Francisco. They're winning outright against Houston, Green Bay on the road, and then against the Jets. So these are good games for them, good teams, good outings where they're just playing all around really good ball. The biggest crux for me in this one is Detroit losing Aiden Hutchinson. I have such a hard time getting past it because what he brought to the defense was just so much. 38% of this team's pressures, 44% of this team's sacks. He had a 38.3% pass rush win rate. No other pass rusher on this team had over 15%. Somebody is going to have to step up. And frankly, this is why the news in the news cycle and the rumor mill is that Detroit needs to be active on this trade market to try to acquire one of these pass rushers. And of course the media is going to embellish a little bit and they're going to go out there and talk about, hey, let's go get Myles Garrett because he might be available, or, hey, let's go call on Micah Parsons because he might be available. When in reality, Hassan Riddick is probably going to be on this team in a couple weeks after he hired a new agent in Drew Rosenhaus.
Yep.
And they're already talking to new teams about getting a trade done. And the Hassan Riddick thing has just been a complete mess this entire time, which is why he had to go get a new agent. And it's all indications that he's trying to come back. He wants to be back as soon as possible. So I would think that would be a target for them that they could probably get on a pretty good price. And Minnesota's pass pro, bottom third in knockdown rate, or I guess technically top third in knockdown rate, only 6.9%. If you leave Darnold too much time, he's going to look like the guy that we've seen early in the season who played really well, looks like he's going on a rampage. And when we look back in a handful of weeks and see that he took down Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, and, now Jared Goff, it's going to be a really impressive group of guys that he's taken down. And that's, if they obviously win. But I think this is going to be a really good game. I think this is going to be a close game, quite a few fireworks. They're going to trade quite a bit of blows. I think over 50.5 is definitely a good look on that one. Anything else that we didn't cover on this one? I can't wait. I'm giddy about this.
No, it should be fantastic. I feel like we should just say the name Justin Jefferson, because I feel like if we talk about the Minnesota Vikings without saying his name, we probably did something wrong. So there you go, Justin Jefferson.
Justin Jefferson, still there, still knows how to play football, still making Sam Darnold look really, really good. So, yep. All right. The next game on the list, not quite as a high-powered one as the last game, but we have Philly heading into New York to take on the Giants. Philly is a 3-point road favorite here. Game total on this one, about 43 points, and it's looking like we're both on the under here, V. Some of the things that I was seeing was that Philly has just 2 overs this season, and they came against 2 offenses that were significantly better than the group they're coming up against this week. That was against Green Bay and Tampa, and the games went over not because Philly put up a whole bunch of points on the board, but it was because their opponents did. They're also just totaling only 17 points per game over their last 3. There are some issues in Philly right now, which I don't think a lot of people are talking about necessarily. And Yes, it's great that they just got AJ Brown back. That's not necessarily going to move the needle for me when you see as many turnover worthy plays as Jalen Hurts is putting out. That's alarming. That's not a really good look for them. When you look at the other side, though, the Giants, they have just won over all year. It was against Seattle in week 5. They only have 9.3 points per game at home this year. That's the worst in the NFL. So
that's tough.
Yeah, that's a tough look. They're getting Neighbors back, I believe. So
Yeah.
I haven't checked exactly recently if he did for sure clear, but they are going to be getting. They're going to be going to get him back, and I'm just not sure that this is a great matchup for them. Wow, hey, if you look at the Giants, their receiving core actually doesn't look too bad. Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, Malik Neighbors, like they do have some guys that can go out there and catch footballs. It's a lot worse in some other places around the NFL. And we've talked about some teams that look a lot worse at receiver, particularly a team that played on Thursday night in the Saints. But when you see what Philly's doing at corner, their investments in the draft are really starting to kind of take shape. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, they're starting to find their footing. They're playing decently well. Now, this coverage unit isn't the best in the league. They're not up there leading anybody in takeaways or any of the advanced metrics that we tend to
dead
pull out.
last in the league in takeaways.
They're pretty much like dead last in a lot of things. They're really not looking horrendously well in a lot of metrics, but they're starting to put together some ability in some plays and showing some flashes where when you weigh that versus what the Giants have been able to produce offensively, I think it's going to be one of those things that kind of just counteracts each other. They're going to muddle each other up. They're going to have some flashes. This is a divisional game. It's going to get muddy. It's going to get messy. 43 isn't a terribly high number, but it's also not a terribly low number. So I think we're both very comfortable taking the under here. V, what are you seeing in this one?
Yeah, definitely like the under in this game. Starting with Philly's offense, I just don't think they're very good right now at all. They scored 21 or fewer points in each of their last 4 games. We talked about how bad the Saints defense was earlier in the show. When these guys met in week 3, Philly scored 15 points on offense. That's it. Tampa Bay's defense, very up and down. Terrible last week against that same Spencer Rattler offense that couldn't do anything last night. Philly scored 16 points on that Tampa Bay defense. It's just they're not doing anything well at all right now on offense. I know they've dealt with some injuries. A.J. Brown missed some time. Devontae Smith has missed some time. But they got everybody back last week, and they still barely beat the Browns and struggled to put up 20 points against that defense that has been playing all too well this year. So I don't like anything that's going on with this Philly offense right now, and I don't really see it turning around anytime soon just because there's no reason to believe in that. They're going up against the Giants defense that is looking kind of legit, especially on that defensive line. The Giants have allowed 21 or fewer points in 4 straight games. They're second in the league in sacks. Dexter Lawrence obviously is having another monster year after his breakout year last year. Brian Burns, though, is also starting to pick it up and look like the legit player that they traded for during the offseason. He terrorized Joe Burrow on Sunday night this past weekend. He's looking really, really good. And for Philly, Jordan Mailata has been ruled out on this one. So more offensive line injuries. I think it's going to be a struggle. Dallas Goedert has also been ruled out for Philly. I don't see this Philly offense doing much of anything in this game. And then, yeah, you mentioned it. This Giants offense, really bad. 21 or fewer points in 5 of their 6 games played, including 15 or fewer in 3 of their 6 games played. They are getting Malik Neighbors back. They should be getting Devin Singletary back. Tyrone Tracy has looked good as a fill-in, and he'll probably get some more carries. But, they lose Andrew Thomas during the week to some freak injury, it seems like. So their already porous offensive line gets just infinitely worse. I just don't see how they're going to be able to protect Daniel Jones in any game going forward. I don't think this Philly defense is great. Philly defense is great. Like I said, they're tied for last in takeaways. Very inconsistent in terms of pass rush getting to the quarterback, but I don't think it matters. Cincinnati's defense was terrible going into that Sunday night game. The Giants team only scored 7 points on them. So I don't see where any points are going to come from in this game whatsoever. So definitely like the under.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. Both teams missing their left tackle now. Jordan Mailata out, Andrew Thomas out. And when you talk about what that means for Philly, which is alarming because I know Brian Burns was dealing with a groin, I believe. I'm not sure.
I think he's listed as questionable heading into this one.
So if he's able to go, that's going to be a huge boost for them because this is a matchup that he's going to eat against with Fred Johnson, who I think he had a 24% pressure rate on pass sets this last week. So it's not a good look. They need to figure something out there because the offense that has looked pretty inept is not going to look a lot better this week. So I right there with you. 43 under, pretty easy one. They're probably going to have like 30 total points in this game.
Oh, yeah.
Next game on the list is a doozy. It's going to have some fireworks, and we're again on the total for this one. Seattle heading into Atlanta to take on the Falcons. Falcons, about 3-point favorites in this game. Game total 50.5. It looks like they're posting at FanDuel, which I'm going to go ahead and go get on. And then upwards to 51.5. And we're both leaning on the over at wherever we're finding it. Some things that I'm just seeing in this one: Seattle 5-1 on overs. Pretty fantastic. These teams together have combined for 6 overs since week 4. That is 100% rate on overs. Atlanta, they're just figuring it out offensively. There's just not much more to say about it. We can't really figure it out all the time. We can't really peg it on what they're going to do great any single week. Sometimes it's the pass game, sometimes it's the running game. Last week it seemed to be a little bit of both. 36 points or more in each of the last 2. 33.3 points per game over their last 3. That's 4th in the NFL. And another big thing is just Seattle's defense just really, really struggling recently. And a lot of it comes to the injuries. I know Reek Woolen has been banged up, and I believe he is slated to be out for this one. They've had some injuries up front, so that's a really tough look. It's really hindered them in pretty much both facets of the game. 29 or more points allowed in each of the last 3, 35.7 points per game. That's 3rd most in the NFL allowed over the last 3. It's just a tough look. I think, you're going to see a lot of fireworks. You're going to see them trade blows. Geno has the most dropbacks in the NFL this season, and it's because they've kind of just forgotten about the running game, which we saw Atlanta forget about the running game quite a few times, but I don't know exactly what to make of it. I think you're just going to see quite a bit of points get put up in this one on both sides, and 51-50, I don't really think it matters too much. I like the over here. What are you seeing in this one, V?
Yep, I am also very much liking the over in this one. I got it at 51. Starting with Seattle's defense, you mentioned it, struggling quite a bit, allowing 29 or more points in each of their last 3 games. They have allowed 390 total yards of offense or more in each of those 3 games. They're giving up the 7th most rushing yards per game at 142.7. This is not the offense you want to be giving up a lot of rushing yards to, because we finally had a nice breakout game from Bijan last week with Atlanta, and then Tyler Algier also continues to get work and does a good job with his carries. Seattle has just 4 takeaways on the season. Trey Brown has been ruled out. Tariq Woolen has been ruled out, that you already mentioned. Nwosu got placed back on IR after returning from an IR stint to start the season, so a tough break for him. And then Atlanta's offense is turning it around, like you said. They scored 36 and 38 points in their last 2 games, over 423 total yards of offense in those games, including 550 against the Bucs a couple of weeks ago. On the flip side, I mentioned it last week. I'll mention it again this week because it continues to hold true. Atlanta's defense is concerning. They are not playing very well right now. They've given up 20 or more points in each of the last 5 games. They gave up 17 first-half points to the Carolina Panthers, a team that should never be scoring that many points in one half. They did turn it around the second half and did a nice job shutting them down, but overall, that's still a concerning trend for them. They only have 5 sacks on the season in Atlanta. That is last in the league. Only a 14% pressure rate, second to last in the NFL behind the Panthers. Just, they're not getting anything. I know they made the big trade for Matthew Judon and during the offseason. That has not worked out super well so far. And then Seattle's offense, as much as we like to hit on their defense, their offense is still playing well enough. They've scored 20 or more points in every single game this season, including at least 24 in 4 of their 6 games. Geno leads the league in passing yards. A lot of that has to do with leading the league in dropbacks, but he's also top 10 in completion percentage. So even though there's a lot of dropbacks, he is being very efficient with those throws and completing a high percentage of them. For Atlanta, Troy Anderson has been ruled out again at linebacker, and Justin Simmons is questionable with a hamstring. So a couple injuries to monitor in this one. Just overall, I'm not seeing either side being able to play any sort of competent defense whatsoever. So definitely loving the over in this one.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it. These are the two quarterbacks that have the most passing yardage in the NFL over. Let me see. Was it 3 games? I think.
Yeah, that would probably make sense.
Yeah, they're up there. So, and it makes a lot of sense. They're throwing the hell out of the ball. So, definitely agree. I think we're both landing on the over there. Now we head into the later slate and another game with a 50-point game total. Carolina heading into Washington to take on the Commanders. We're both in on the game total here. I'm also leaning towards Washington. I'm liking Washington even at -8.5. I have a couple of really big spreads here that we're hoping to cover. Washington 4-1-1 against the spread. A push last week. I mean, as much as I was taking them at +7, and I like that. I'll take a push against a team like the Ravens that are playing phenomenal football right now. 5-1 on overs as well. They're 2-0 against the spread at home. When we look conversely at Carolina, it's just as bad as you could expect. They are 1-5 against the spread and also 5-1 on overs. So their defense is not doing absolutely anything. They've lost all but one game this year by 10 or more points. They've lost 3 this year by 21 or more points. So I'm really not afraid of this line being as large as it is. They're -12 points against the spread margin. That's the worst in the NFL. Whereas you look at Washington, they're +8.5 against the spread margin. That's the third best in the NFL behind Denver and Minnesota. So even against the spread, they're crushing it. And Carolina is just not doing anything against the spread. Prior to pushing that game last week against Baltimore, Washington beat Arizona and Cleveland by 28 and 21, respectively. Those teams are better than what we're seeing out of Carolina right now. I'm really not all that afraid of it, especially with Washington being at home. Carolina just does not rush the passer well, and they can't stop the run. And those are two things that Washington has taken full advantage of this year. They've run the ball really, really well. And when teams can't rush them and, force Jaden Daniels off of an uncomfortable spot. And I mean, even still, he's been making a lot of those plays look pretty easy anyway. I would say that they're just going to be in for a really rough day and it's not going to look pretty. So I'm liking Washington -8.5 here, as well as the over on 51.5. I know, V, that you're also targeting the game total on this one. What are you seeing in it?
Yep, I'm also liking the over at 51.5. I mean, both of these defenses are just not very good at all right now. We'll start with Carolina. They continue to be a league worst defense, allowing a league high 33.8 points per game, whereas Washington is allowing 24.2 points per game. Both of those rank in the bottom 10 to 12 in the NFL. Both of these defenses rank in the bottom half in passing yards and rushing yards allowed. Washington has just 4 takeaways on the season. Carolina only has 6. So neither defense is really doing anything well at all whatsoever. Carolina's defense now has to go up against Washington's offense that has been terrific. They're tied for second in points scored. They lead the league in scoring percentage, meaning drives that end in points. Daniels and company will have a very, very nice and easy day against this Carolina defense. For Carolina's offense, I think since Andy Dalton has been in there outside of the Chicago game, I think this offense has been fine. Not super special, but not bad. They scored 17 in the first half against Atlanta, like I mentioned earlier, before the wheels fell off in the second half. But they've scored at least 20 points in 3 of the 4 games that Andy Dalton has started. So I think they are a serviceable offense in this game. I think both teams should easily score over 20 points, with Washington getting into the mid to high 30s, making this one a pretty easy over for me.
Yeah, this Washington team has punted 11 times this year, and
pretty good.
It's the fewest in the NFL by quite a bit. So pretty impressive to say the least. And the last game on the schedule, which is crazy because it's almost like having multiple primetime games in this slot because the late win or in this week because this late window isn't really that stacked. And so a lot of people are going to be watching this game here. The Super Bowl rematch, Kansas City heading into San Francisco. San Francisco minus 1.5 points here. Game total anywhere around about 47 points. V, you are in on this one. Which side are you leaning?
Yeah, I am taking the 49ers in this game to cover minus 1.5 at home. I know it's never comfortable betting against Patrick Mahomes, but I feel like this is a good spot to do it. Kansas City's offense just has not been very good this season, to be honest. I know they're 5-0 and they've been winning games somewhat easily based on the final scores of these games, but you really have to dig deep into this one, and you'll see that their offense has been, underperforming based on expectations we have for this unit. They've scored exactly 2 offensive touchdowns in each of their last 4 games. Mahomes has 6 touchdowns to 6 interceptions on the season. They are middle of the pack in terms of rushing yards per game. So, this offense, they're not really doing anything, at an elite level that we would be expecting from them. They're going up against the San Francisco defense that, they're not quite the elite unit that we've seen out of them for the past couple of years, but they still have studs like Joey Bosa and Fred Warner, who continue to make big plays week in and week out. Bosa had a pick a couple weeks ago, and then he was all over Geno Smith last week on Thursday night. Fred Warner continues to be the best linebacker in football, so I think they'll continue to give this Kansas City offense some troubles. And don't forget, I know Kansas City is coming off the bye week, but they are still dealing with some major injuries, whether it's Rashee Rice, who's out for the season, or Isaiah Pacheco, who's still out. We saw them do really good stuff with Juju and Kareem Hunt in that game on Monday night before the bye. But that was against that same Saints defense that we've been railing against all show. So don't expect to see the same thing against this San Francisco defense. On the flip side, I think the San Fran offense is kind of starting to roll and figure it out after a little bit of a slow start to the season. They scored 30 or more points in 2 out of the last 3 games. They're getting slightly healthier as the season continues. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is still out. We don't know when he'll be back. And Juwan Jennings has been ruled out for this game, but everybody else seems to be fully healthy. Jordan Mason will play in this game despite being on the injury report this week. Debo's healthy. Brandon Ayuk is healthy. George Kittle's healthy. So I think you will have your, as much offense as you will need from this unit in this game. Kansas City's defense has been very good. They're allowing 17 or less in 3 straight games, but they have not played terribly good offenses in that stretch. They played a struggling Chargers offense where they had a ton of injuries. They played a New Orleans offense that, again, has been very bad. Derek Carr got hurt in that game. So they're playing a lot of struggling offenses so far. I think this is going to be a much tougher matchup. So overall, I trust Kyle Shanahan and this offense to get things done. Don't forget, this is a team that took a much better Kansas City team to overtime in the Super Bowl. Much, much worse Kansas City team this year. So I think it should not be too much to ask for San Fran to pull this one out.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at some of what we've seen in terms of covers and in terms of against the spread, the Chiefs are 3-1-1 against the spread, so like not terrible, but like you've said, there are just some holes. They seem to play everybody close, and if you go and look at some of the books, Patrick Mahomes is still the odds-on favorite for the MVP, which I think isn't going to be the case, especially when you talk about after this game. I think you're going to have, Brock Purdy's odds go way higher, and by the end of the season, I'm pretty sure that this award for MVP is going to be whatever Lamar Jackson can end up doing, and probably Brock Purdy. So that's just kind of how it's looking like it's going to shake out. Brock has looked great, especially when they've gotten some of their pieces back. And that's even to say that they don't have Christian McCaffrey, but they still run the ball decently well. They're still throwing the ball all over the place. I know Ricky Pearsall is supposed to be making his debut this week after returning from the non-football injury list following his gunshot wound. So that's definitely a big boost for them. And, consistency has been somewhat of an issue there, but motivation is not going to be an issue in this one. 1.5 is a pretty good line that I would like to see for them. Now, when we do talk about it, KC hasn't really been a dog in anything this year, which is why you're seeing this game be, let me get the number here, 80% of the cash, 78% of the tickets on this one. So the public is very, very heavy on taking Kansas City in the points. But I think, still 20% of the cash. I think you're seeing sharps who are thinking the same way that we're thinking here. V with San Francisco is just really, really strong, and they're going to be at home. And given all the injuries that Kansas City has right now, they're playing well, but the buck has to stop somewhere. So I completely agree. This is a different matchup than that Monday night matchup. Kansas City, like you said, had the bye. San Francisco's not that far off on rest either. I'm pretty sure their last game
was
a
Thursday night game last week, so they had a mini bye this week.
So they had the mini bye. So both teams fairly rested, and I think we're going to see a great matchup. I can't wait to see it break out. So that does it for us, V. That wraps week 7. But I know that I have some picks coming up for the primetime games. I know you're probably up there as well. So for anybody who wants to check it out, hit us up in the Discord. Go to importantnonsense.com. That's how you become a member. Get in the Discord. You can ask us any of your betting questions, see all of our picks for the week. We like to hit our primetime games in there, talk about some of the stuff that we're liking and why we're liking it. As well, you can go and hit up the fantasy guys and ask them all your questions regarding your start sits and your trades with the trade deadline coming up and all that good stuff. We are back next week, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern. Can't wait to break it down. It's going to be another good week. I think that about does it. V, do you have any parting words for the folks at home?
Yeah, like you said, hop into the Discord. We're going to have some extra picks for you guys. I got a couple picks on the game total for the Monday night games. It is a doubleheader Monday night week this week, so a couple games on the game totals and a spread pick for the Monday night game. So hop in there, check out the picks, ask your questions. We're always happy to help out and help you guys make some money this weekend. Should be a very, very fun slate of football.
It should be a good one. And until next time, y'all, good night. Good luck.